Hey, what's good, everybody? I'm your host, RJ Garcia, coming at you guys with Holy Talk Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. It is kind of a longer one today with our good friend, my cousin Ben, but sit back and relax. You're not going to want to miss a second of this one, man. I'm telling you right now. So take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with a friend because you never know who can be inspired today. Let's get to it. See what the life of Ben is all about in talk number 4. Super excited to have you, Ben. I appreciate you taking the opportunity and taking the time. It was sort of one of them spontaneous like pod setups we just threw together in my garage because he was bringing a lens to sponsor with the podcast. Believe it's on this shot here.
That one, yeah.
So shout out to you for supporting and leaving it here for the ministry, man. It means a lot. I was just like, you know what? We're going to set everything up and we're going to shoot your testimony right now. Are you ready?
It's like, hey, did you bring your camera? As a matter of fact, I did.
No, man. Your story is one that could be a Netflix series in itself.
Oh,
and
God, it is.
You know, to see what God has brought you in and through, to see it, you know, obviously we're going to get into the details here in a second, but just to see it all, live it all with you and be right there beside you and still today speaking, be the strongest I think you've ever been in the Lord is inspiring. And bro, I can't wait to hear all about it. You want to just let the people know a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, meeting your wife, having kids, getting married, and then obviously what the Lord did in your life and meeting you where you are.
Well, my name is Benito Rivas. I go by Ben for short.
Benjamin.
Hey, Benjamin since 86, brother. Born to two parents. One is deceased now. My mother's still alive. I was born in Bryan, College Station, raised here in San Antonio when I was, I want to believe, like 5-6 years old, first grade. And I was brought in and I was raised in a Catholic home and in a broken home. Now, when I tell people broken home, not like broken, but more like parents divorced. That's what I've always been told that's what a broken home is two parents divorced. So grown up, divorced parents, was raised Catholic, did the whole thing when I was, not able to talk. I was baptized at a very young age, of course, still a baby.
So you knew of the Lord.
I knew of the Lord, and I was always fighting the Lord at that young age. But again, when you're like in elementary and middle school, you don't want to listen to the Lord. You barely want to listen to your parents.
Were your mom and dad very religious per se?
Not really. Just more like, hey, we have to go to church on Sunday. It was more like a kind of like a chore. Like, we just got to go. Like, you have to go on Sunday. And then me being young, I was like, well, I want to drink the wine and take the bread. And so my mom was like, you have to do your confirmation and your communion. And I was like, all right, well, let's do it. And I totally regretted it. Nothing against, the Catholic religion. It was one of the founding, religions, when starting. But, for me, it was just, I didn't like the monotone. It's like watching a very boring movie or like America's Diamond commercial, like 1 in the morning.
America's Diamond commercial.
American Diamond. So I would fall asleep, and then too, being a kid, you stay up late and then being forced to go to the early mass, 8 o'clock in the morning. Like, who does that?
So moving on to your teenage years, when did you meet Desiree? And
teenage years, so going into middle school, high school, going back and forth through parents, and I met Desiree.
Hold on, your parents divorced?
My parents divorced when I was 5.
When you were 5?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Kind of sad, man. I wanted, growing up, most of my friends and people in school had both their parents, and then I didn't have both my parents, and then I had a stepdad in my life, and I was just like jealous of it because everybody had their original mother and original father, and I had my mom and my dad who I saw every other weekend.
Yeah.
And then when I would see him on the weekend, he would pretty much work on a Saturday. Of course, me being young, didn't understand. Was like, I'd go on Friday night, Saturday morning. He was like, I'm taking off. I got to go to work. His work was usually down the street. He was a mechanic. And yeah, and then you get back and we do pretty much whatever he wanted to do. So I kind of resented my parents for that. I'd always wanted to know the backstory of what went on, and they would always be like, ask your mom, ask your dad. And then when they were finally telling me, I was like, man, y'all are both full of it. I didn't know what to believe
They
anymore.
remarried?
Yes, my mom remarried before my stepdad passed, and my dad remarried when I was in middle school.
Okay. You have step parents now.
Sure. Yeah.
Going through middle school and high school. How were you in high school? Were you like Good kid, bad kid?
In between. I mean, if you ask my mother, I was a good kid. And you ask me, I was horrible. Like, if I'm being honest, I was more of a class clown. Class clown, didn't like the rules, kind of wanted to do everything my way. At that time, I thought I knew everything. No, everybody was wrong. I was never right. I was never wrong. Everybody was wrong. And it was just, you know, just going through life, just, being that kid, that teenager, just chasing women, barely making it by in school. But school for me was kind of easy. So I didn't pay any mind to it. As long as I passed, I was just like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, I got through the class. I'm not really worried about how high of a grade I got. Like, did I make it to the next level or not?
Right.
So I was, mischievous, hung out with, I hung out with all types of people. I've hung out with skaters, the dancers and ravers. Back in my day, they had like dancers. We'd legit get in, like, go to lunch and start
So you
breakdancing.
lay out a piece of cardboard.
No
spin on your
cardboards.
head.
Hey,
Nah.
real people didn't need cardboard, dog.
That's funny.
No, yeah.
So, okay, now where does Desiree walk in?
Desiree walks in. I am finishing high school, and I don't know, something goes on with me and the ex, and then I don't know, I called her out of the blue. I had her number and I called her and I was like, hey, what are you doing? And she was like, is this Ben, like Edith's boyfriend? I was like, no, we're not even together anymore. She was like, oh, okay. And we just like started talking and hanging out. So we talk. I meet her parents like the next day or whatever. And I was just like, man, like,
That
I don't know.
escalated quickly.
Yeah, that escalated real quickly. Like, because we were just hanging out. Like, it wasn't even like, hey, we're gonna go on a date. Like, we didn't do things the right way. And I sometimes regret it. Like, man, I wish I would have met. Like I tell her all the time. Like, I wish I would have met you in high school, so that way I wouldn't have to run through all these other women to where I am now.
In a sense, you felt like you had a lot of baggage.
I did.
You're hauling around.
I did.
Coming into this relationship.
Yeah, I hated it, and I was just like, man, like. Because then when you haul around all this baggage, especially being a guy, you're just so prideful and you're so like, hey, well, I can go get any girl I want, or I've been with this many, like the numbers game. It's like the more numbers you had, like you were like cooler.
Yeah.
And when I met her and we started talking, I was just like, well, she was a lot different from when I was usually dating. And then
wait. So she tells you.
So we meet in May, right? Mm-hmm. So we start talking, we meet in May, and then a month later, around her grandpa's birthday, she texts me, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oof. Yeah, I'm at work.
And how long are y'all together at this point, you said?
We weren't really together. We were just like, whatever. There was no, like a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like
So that escalated really quickly then.
So quick.
Yeah.
I mean, guys and women just didn't have any standards. And, if I'm being real, like, it was just one of those where it's like, it is what it is at that point. Like, there was nothing between both of us. So she gets pregnant. I get a text message. I'm at work. I'm just always being a smart butt. So she texted me like, hey, I'm pregnant. And no joke, I was like, with emotion. And if you know my wife, me and my wife are complete opposites. I joke around pretty much 24/7, and she is not the type to just like joke around unless she knows you. So I'm telling her this. She doesn't know me to the T, and she's just like, if you don't want to do this, like, I can do this on my own. I wasn't raised like that. My mother taught me a lot more things like that. Like, if all the things I've learned from my mother is one of those, like, hey, if you do something, you gotta do all the way through it. Same thing with my dad. And I always told myself, I didn't want to get married at that time. I never wanted to get married, but I also wanted kids. And I don't know how that makes sense. And it was like, I wanted the kids, but without the relationship or anything, just like, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I always told myself, I don't want my kids to grow up like how I grew up.
Right. I think that's every parent's goal.
Yeah. I don't want to be in a broken home. And I told her, like, no, like, I'm in this. And she was like, you could, like, she gave me an out. Like, Desiree really gave me an out. She was just like, if you want to, you could leave whenever you want. Like, I don't need you. And I was like, no, like, I don't want to do that. So I was just working at a restaurant, and all of a sudden, like, I hear this and I'm like, okay, I went through something with my ex-girlfriend about, a false pregnancy. So I was kind of like really skeptical. I was like, all right, well, I want to go to a doctor's appointment. Like, I want to actually be there. So I go to the first appointment and I hear the heartbeat and my heart starts like to beat. Like I dropped. Like I was like, dude, I'm
You started doubling
yeah,
the
18.
heartbeat of the baby.
So like what, 18? I'm 22 years old and I'm like, dude, I'm about to have a little person that I'm about to be responsible for. Like, I got to do something. Like, I haven't been doing anything. I was partying, I was drinking, smoking cigarettes, always hanging out at a friend's house, like, bouncing around from homes just because I didn't like the rules at my mom's house. So I go to my dad's. I don't like the rules at my dad's. I'm back at my mom's.
And for a lot of kids in America nowadays, especially in a lot of my family, like on both sides of the side of the house, it'd be like that,
Yeah.
especially with stepmom and dads. Like, it's sad, but the broken marriages cause broken relationships in kids' lives. And you're like going to mom's house whenever she's nice, going to dad's house whenever they're nice. And if they make you upset, you go to vice versa's house. You get away with certain things at mom's versus dad's. You get away with certain things at dad's versus mom's. You know what I mean?
My whole dad's thing too was like when I was going to school and I got in trouble on Friday and it was my dad's weekend, she would call my dad or tell my dad, and my parents didn't get along at all. They couldn't be in a room for like 5 minutes. And she would tell him that, hey, he did da. And he was like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, that happened on your watch, like not my watch. So she
had a little bitterness.
Yeah. So she would always be like, well, he needs to be punished on your weekend. And he was like, if I do that, he's not going to want to come over.
Right.
And he was absolutely correct.
So you had a lot of division with your mom and dad.
I did, man. And I caused that on purpose. So it was one of those things where I was just like that. Like, I was always very manipulative growing up. Yeah. Like I knew the right words to say. I'm very, very persuasive. I just
gaslighting.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of it. And, I'm the firstborn. So my mom sits there and says she don't play favorites. It's her mom. But I was her favorite. Like I was the legit favorite. Yeah. And it was always, and she would show me, like she would tell me too, like, hey, we're growing up. She's like, you just walk up to me and say, Mama, I love you. And then he would hug me. And I was like, I would never do that. And then my mom had legit pictures. I was like, oh,
so how did they feel when you told them you're about to have a baby?
They didn't believe me either because of the previous thing that I went through.
Oh, the false pregnancy thing?
False pregnancy thing. And so I finally get it. I get a thing and then the sonogram and I show them and they're like, okay. My mom was kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it. And my dad was more receptive to it. So he was more like, yeah, like, he was getting kind of excited
to be a grandpa.
Yeah, because he was really excited the last time. Like I never saw my dad cry, but only like 4 times out of my life. I'm 38 now, so back then, like my dad was like grown up to where like you don't cry, like men don't cry at all, and that was that thing going in the back in the day, like
tough love.
Yeah, very tough love, and dude, he. Like when he found out about the false pregnancy before Desiree, like he sat there and cried with me, and I never would have ever thought in my life like I'd have ever seen my dad cry like that with me, and it was crazy. And then that, like he was excited. He was kind of excited, and he was like, "Well, we'll see." And at the time, I was kind of staying with my dad, so I would stay at my dad's, and I would stay with Desiree at her grandma's house, and like back and forth, and. As she started showing, my dad got more excited. He was like, I'm going to have a grandson.
How was y'all's relationship with you and Desiree? Like, I know y'all were only together a month before y'all got pregnant. Did you guys like quickly fall in love? Did this kind of bring you together? Or were you guys just like in mutual agreement to like raise a kid together?
Pretty much mutual agreement. She wasn't in love with me and I kind of really wasn't in love with her because we know nothing about each other. It was more like, hey, I meet up. Hey, what are you doing? Nothing. Hey, I'm going to come over. Okay. And then, yeah.
Where's God now in this stage of your life?
Like I said, Catholic background. So I was just like, it is what it is. Like, maybe I should go to church and pray. Didn't think about it. It's crazy. Like, we tried to go on church on our own after having Josiah a little bit afterwards because her grandma would always kind of say, like, hey, go to church. And we tried. We just couldn't get into it. The way we got back into church and, dude, I owe this woman a lot, and she'll always say, all glory to God, is your mother. Your mother, dude, I don't even know how much.
Love you, Mom.
Shout out, Lisa. She, coming in the family, I didn't meet you right away coming in, because, they didn't really hang out with y'all like that. So it was weird to like finally start meeting more of, my father-in-law, Richard, or what he goes by Pops, his people. And I was like, because I was always used to just his parents and his sister, and that was pretty much it.
You have Josiah.
We have Josiah.
Where are you and Desiree at this point with the new baby?
We are figuring it out. We lived with her grandmother. We were, and for me, it was more like, since I grew up Catholic, I was like, hey, we got to get him baptized as a baby, because that's how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So not even trying to break generational curse like that, because technically you don't need to be baptized as a baby, maybe dedicated, but
the baptism is like a public declaration of your faith in Jesus, and
they just would publicly make it for
you're making that choice to publicly do it and say, I believe in Jesus in the resurrection.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a symbolization that the old is washed away and the new is brought to life in a sense. And as a baby, technically you can't have that fathom in your mind yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So Josiah, born, figuring it out. We're doing everything together, still having doubts because, we never dated. We never went anywhere and just really dated. It was more like, hey, I have a doctor's appointment on Thursday. All right, well, I'll pick you up. We'll go get tacos, or we'll go do the sonogram, and then we'll get tacos, and we'll just chill for the rest of the day. Because I would always get the day off to go do the sonogram, hear the heartbeat, everything like that. We had Josiah. Like, things changed. Like, my family started coming together. Like my mom and Anna and Richard and then my dad and them, and then Lynette coming in, my stepmom, and everything was just like kind of coming all together. But when you don't have that faith, like, a lot gets torn apart. Like, we were constantly fighting just over dumb things.
Yeah.
Pretty much the past. Like, I was really bad about never letting things go. And then too, just like my past was catching up. Like old girlfriends or just people that I messed with were like still in my phone, and I never deleted them because I just wasn't like, I didn't talk to you. So there was nothing to really do.
Yeah.
Old text messages coming up that I never deleted or whatever, just like whatever. And was getting in trouble for things I wasn't even doing anymore.
So I assume at this point you guys are trying to take your life serious.
Trying to take your life serious.
Be together,
look for a different job.
Small little toxic things that
dude.
like lingered from your previous life.
Dude, you're like, I tell a lot of people, it's like, the past is the past, but like for me, like before I could actually sit here and look at everything, I was like, hey, I did this in the past, and telling people you got to let it go. I was that person that could not let go. Like, I just could not let it go. Or, if the girlfriend, the ex would text like, hey, what are you doing? I'd respond back when I didn't have to. I shouldn't even have to respond back. It should have just been one of those like, hey, you're done. We're done.
Yeah.
But
so how long after Josiah did you guys have Benito?
She always says he wasn't planned, but I always say like he was kind of planned.
And how far apart are they in age?
About almost 2 years.
2 years.
About 2 years, yeah.
And then fast forward, how many more years before Noah popped out?
Oh, Noah Bear, dude. So Noah is a product of a fully covenant marriage. So
oh yeah, so your wedding happened before then.
Actually, our wedding happened at your parents' old house. Yep, so you were in the Air Force at the time, and
I was in tech school. I crashed the party.
Yeah, we had started trying to get into church and do all this, but we still weren't sitting right with the Lord.
Fully committed.
Yeah. So I remember your mother telling us something, and she was just like, like kind of like, hey, you're kind of living in sin, y'all have kids and y'all not married and yada, yada, yada. And I was just like, you know what? You're right. And because technically you want to meet the person, date them, know who they are, get married, then, come together and then have kids. That's the way it's supposed to be. So we're trying to plan a wedding. We're trying to figure it out with the budget we have, and trying to see if we could do it in the church. See if the pastor, we were going to Bethel at the time, would do the thing, how much he charges. And some pastors, they don't charge nothing. They pretty much donation.
Yeah.
So we were gonna do that, and it was a thing too. Like, are they like full members of the church? And I was just like, So.
Yeah, a lot of churches have a lot of guidelines.
Yeah.
If you expect the pastor to
like
ordain the wedding. officiate the wedding, I should say.
Well, luckily, your father has a cousin.
Yeah.
Your father, his cousin, agreed to marry us, Oscar.
Yeah, like a
Shout
whole
out
other
Oscar.
second cousin.
Yeah,
It's like a
another
cousin's
ex-
cousin right there.
Yeah, you ain't lying. I haven't talked to Oscar in a minute, man. I miss that guy. Anyways, so, and then we're like, well, okay, we can get someone to marry us. I was like, where are we gonna have it? And then your mother had this amazing idea. She's like, hey,
Our backyard.
Yeah, why don't you have it in my backyard? I was all sweet. We're gonna get married in what she wants November. That's like, it's pretty outside. It wasn't too cold. It wasn't too hot. It was like perfect weather outside. Yeah. And yeah, we got married in your parents' old backyard.
What did that do for you guys? Obviously, bring y'all ultimately together in God's will.
You would hope so, but when you don't fully know him the way you should know him at that point, like even if you get married just because you do everything that you're supposed to do to get married, it's not always like
the right time.
Not always the right time. Your heart's not fully in it or like this. So like you would think like, oh, we got married, problems go away. Obviously they don't go away if you're not fully committed. So we were having marital issues like the first year. And usually the first year is supposed to be like the honeymoon stage where it's just like, oh, lovey-dovey.
Yeah.
That. And we go back and forth. Mind you, we did have great times and things like that, but we also had ugly times due because I wasn't saved, you know, growing up a certain way and me being a certain person, just being jealous and trying to be controlling. I was an ugly person to my wife because I didn't fully know God. I was like, when I look back at my life now, it's like, man, who is that guy? Like, I wish I can go back and punch that guy in the face because he's a jerk. He's a big old weenie. And yeah, that happened.
So I mean, then you have Noah.
We have Noah a year later.
Did that bring you together?
Kind of. Started was still one thing that was kind of holding me back was drinking. I was drinking. I was working on oil field at that time. We would get out and then we'd hit up a bar on the way home and just like slam down beers and then drive home, which was stupid because we were already an hour away from the city. So we would drive home and then just like, I was never home. I was home for the weekend and just out of it and just being stupid, just drinking. That was pretty much it. Like most people, oil field.
So drinking was your bad habit per se for your family. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't something that you can look back and be like, it wasn't that bad. It actually was bad.
No, it was super bad because I'd sit there and be like, oh, I know how to drink, and then nope, up to like 2-3 in the morning just drinking.
So what caused things to change for you?
Watching my family start slipping away. You know, noticing that when I would drink, I was just an ugly person, and then me not being a good person, not me being, godlike to my wife, calling her out, in front of people when we should just be doing that stuff at home. And I'm still working on myself as far as I've come. So
I mean, we all are. Everybody is a work in progress. If anybody says they're perfect, they lie to you.
You ain't lying. May he who is without sin cast the first stone, right?
You ain't lying.
You ain't lying. So Noah's getting older. Desiree finally starts working. We're living on our own. And actually, because my wife tells me all the time, when we were staying in some mobile homes over there on the southwest side called Valley Ridge, she said that was the happiest times of her life. And for me, it was the same. We were doing everything on our own. We weren't asking our parents for money. I was working full time. She was working part time. We were making it. We lived on our own. 3 kids. 2 still fairly young adults.
Yeah.
And the kids going to school. Noah's about 2 at the time, and we are we're doing it. We're thriving. We try to make it to church and things like that. Things were good. And I'm be the first to admit it, like, we didn't have a lot of God in us, but, like, we were, like, lukewarm Christians in and out at the same time, still drinking, still doing other things, but we were a lot better at that point. Like, we were finally coming together, like, as a pair. And then...
So you want to touch on the passing of your father?
Yeah, so for the longest time, me and my dad weren't never eye to eye. Like, it was always, like, you got 2, alpha males trying to fight for supremacy. Of course, my dad is older. He knows a lot more. Me just thinking I still know things. But at this point, it wasn't even about like who knows more. It was more about like, hey, why aren't you here for my kids? Like, these are your grandkids. No matter what we go through, like, call about the kids. And his whole thing was like, well, you can always call me too. And I was like, yeah, but why would I call you to tell you how your grandkids are doing when you should be the one calling to
So
ask?
you were disappointed on his actions as a grandfather.
I was. And it wasn't until he almost passed away the last 2 years of his life where he started being the dad and the grandparent he should have been.
This whole time.
The dad that I always kind of wanted, the more we were always talking. And my dad wasn't one of those where I could sit in the car and, drive to like Austin or whatever and have this great conversation. I was always, growing up, always trying to find like a middle ground for us to be like
common ground. Just
to like, hey,
somewhere.
we talk about something.
When was the last time you spoke to him? Like, how was that?
Dude, that day. So I remember that day like it was yesterday. The last time I saw my dad was actually Valentine's Day. So he, at the time, he had stopped working on vehicles and he started hotshotting. So for those who don't know what hotshotting is basically like you want to ship something over, especially like a bigger item, but you need it like today. So it's like, okay, if I order this, usually you order it, but you only need like one thing you order, it's going to be here in like 2 to 3 days, maybe even 4, maybe about a week. Hotshotting is basically like,
so it's like expedited delivery for like
delivery
big items.
For freight. Yeah, freight kind of
freight. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, we need this over here. Oh, great. If you're on the road, you could only drive about like 10 to 12 hours a day. He drove my stepmom, so it was like about 24 hours they could do it. So he was always hotshotting things around. And his whole thing was my dad loved to travel and he loved food. So it worked perfect. He was like, why not get paid to do something I love to do? So he never looked at it as work. He just looked at it as I'm getting paid to travel. And he went all over. He would always call me when it's out. He's like, hey, I'm over here in Colorado. Hey, I'm over here in Florida. Hey, he's like, man, I had this place out here. And I'm like, man, like, I want to do that. I want to travel.
So your last time, Valentine's Day.
So he calls me. I'm working at Spectrum at the time. He calls me and he was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm at this house. It's pointed for like 8 hours. But I was like, it's a new customer. Basically, they're already hooked up. I just got to swap out boxes because they've just swapped over the account. It's only going to take maybe about an hour or two. I'm going to kind of write it out. Why, what's up? Okay, I'm in town. I want to see if you want to have lunch. And I was like, I don't pass up on a free lunch. Heck no, bro. Drove over, clocked out. We have lunch. I remember everything we had. I had a bacon cheeseburger with a cherry Coke and some fries. My dad had 2 Budweisers and the onion rings.
What did he tell you at that lunch?
We were there. We were having lunch and this and that. And my dad told me, like, I'm proud of you. And I was like, man. He had never told me that. And I was like, man. That kind of like, I didn't think of it like as a big thing at the time, but the past and the history that me and my dad had, and like the arguments, the yelling at each other and everything like that, like to hear him tell me that, like it meant a lot. And it was just simple words. It was no gift. It was no $1,000 gift, no brand new car. My dad's giving me cars. And out of everything that my dad has ever said or anything, like that was the one that meant the most. I hugged him and he was like, oh yeah, we'll be going out and we'll be back soon. And I just hugged him like it was like, oh yeah. And I know one of the things that I've told you before, and it was like, man, one things that we take for granted is like walking out of the door and thinking that we're gonna be back.
Yeah.
That same day. And of course, I hugged him like that was it. And everybody always says it when they lose somebody they love so much. And I was like, man, I wish I would have held and hugged him longer. And I've always told myself that too, man. If I would have known that was the last day I was going to see my father, I would have held him tighter.
Mm-hmm.
I would have told him thank you for all the knowledge that you were giving me. But, took it for granted.
And how long after that lunch did he pass away?
The next week and a half.
He was traveling, and
he's traveling, and they're out there in Oklahoma. Now that I think about it, they're in Oklahoma. Sorry, I gaze off sometimes. they're in Oklahoma. I'm on the phone with Desiree, just got done with the job, and she's like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm about to go to lunch." You know, we were talking. I was like, "I'm about to go to lunch. You know, what are you gonna do?" She's like, "Oh, you know, I'm here with Noah, yada yada yada." And she's like, and then I get a call, and it's my stepmom, and I was like, "Oh, would you look at that? I'm getting a call. That means free lunch." I'm like, I didn't think nothing of it. All I know is I'm getting a call, and usually they would call me just to see what I was doing, or usually they're in town. So I
They're
was
in
like,
town to invite you to have lunch.
yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, here goes. I'm getting free lunch right now. And she calls me like crying. She's like, oh my God, like she's frantic. And I'm like, I can't hear you. I need you to talk to me, right? Like, what's going on? And all I heard was your dad was in the accident. They don't know if he's gonna make it. And like my heart dropped. I was like, what? And she was like, your dad was in an accident. They don't know if he's gonna make it. And me just thinking about my dad, I kind of felt bad. Now that I think about it, I felt bad. Like, I didn't even ask how she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, well, my whole thing was what happened? How did that? Like, where are you at? She's like, we're in Oklahoma. And I was like, where? And like, she's frantically, because I didn't know. She just watched my dad like pass away. And I was just like she was watching him die. And I was like, dude, like I'm freaking out. And I'm like, what? No. Like, you know, like, everything was good. So like I get off the phone, I call my boss and I'm like, hey, I gotta go. My dad was just in a bad accident and they don't know if he's gonna make it. And I was like, I'm about to take this van all the way to Oklahoma. I don't care. I race home and one of my favorite cousins on my dad's side, her name is Brandy Caballero. Well, De Jesus. She was remarried. And she is not with us anymore at the moment either. We talked about everything, and shout out to Brandy. And if any of the family members see this, she was the one that kind of brought me back into my family because when I was growing up, I kind of disassociated with my family because I live in San Antonio, they live in College Station.
Yeah.
I just want to be around my friends and party with my friends. I never partied with my family like that until I got older. But anyways, fast forward to where we're talking about. I called her and I'm like, Brandy, my dad's been in an accident. She was like, what? And I was like, my dad, he was in an accident. They don't know if he's gonna make it. I'm frantically driving. I am literally off of Nacogdoches and 410, driving all the way 410 south to Traders Village. If anybody knows where that's at, that's about like 20 or 30 minutes depending on traffic. I'm flooring it, bro. I'm in some 1900 Ford Eco van, like hauling through San Antonio, like going through everything. Things are falling in the back. I don't care. I'm just trying to get home to like throw myself in my car and just drive all the way out to Oklahoma. Like I'm freaking out. I'm driving. And I'm like, please God. And she's like, and you know, usually people, you know, we call out to God in a time of need when we when we need him the most. Like when everything is going bad, all of a sudden we want to pray. And that's when I was just like, you know, please God, please God. And, you know, she's on the phone with me. She's trying to keep me calm. She's like, just drive. Just, you know, drive home, like just get home safe and yada yada. And I'm speeding and she's like, just take it easy. I was like, no, I gotta go. And I was like, I gotta call Des. So I call my wife. My wife, you know, she's like, what do you mean? So I was like, you know, my dad's been in an accident. Like, we gotta go. Like, just throw clothes in the bag and, you know, we get there. We're driving out. Like, I don't care. And she's like, okay. And then like, I get off the phone. I get home. And my cousin calls me and she's like, oh my God, Ben, I'm so sorry. And I was like, so sorry for what? And she's like, oh, because now she's stuck telling me the bad news. Like, so she felt really bad. She's like, your dad didn't make it. And oh man, I always thought when my dad passed away.
You were driving when you got this news?
Oh, I'd finally parked. Like I just parked. Dude, I made it on the other side of town in like 10 minutes. I was like 25 to 30 minutes away from the house. I made it in like 10 to 15.
And you were about to head out to Oklahoma?
I was about to drive to Oklahoma to go see my dad.
And you got the news?
I got the news. I parked and dude, like, I was like, I told her, I was like, I just saw him a week and a half ago. Like, this can't be real. Like, like everything was going good. Like, why? I'm yelling in a van, so mad at God because my dad is gone. And I was like, why? Like, why him? I go inside. That's her. Like, what happened? And I was like, he didn't make it. the whole family broke down. The kids are crying. Noah is about 2, almost 3. Doesn't know what's going on. Sees everybody crying. Starts crying. And I'm like, dude. I'm just like. And at that moment, my life, I didn't know. Like, my life has always been a roller coaster throughout my whole life. Just because I've always wanted to act out and whatever. And I didn't know how much of a roller coaster ride I was going to go through until my dad passed away. Because as soon as that happened, I started making just decisions on my own without consulting my wife, without talking about it.
If there was something you could say to your dad now, what would it be? Is there like a regret of never telling him something?
Yeah. Thank you for always believing in me. I don't think I've ever told him anything.
It's the last thing you remember of him, which is at least something you at least got to hear that a lot of dads and kids never get to be told is he's proud of you.
Dude, that is true.
Well, I know that was a huge shakeup in your life.
One of the biggest. I didn't think it could get any worse.
I think I remember reaching out to you and giving the condolences and everything in between.
Your parents showed up to the funeral and I think to the burial. No, they only showed up to the viewing and then yeah.
Well, we'll get some time so you can gather yourself and proceed, and we'll call this a small little intermission, if you will. So we'll be right back. Hey, what's up, guys? Hopefully you guys are enjoying this video to see, man, everything he's gone through. But just sit back and relax and wait, and how the Lord took a hold of Ben's life. Take a moment really quick to like this video. I know it's difficult to get distracted just watching this really good content, if you will. Just go down below, hit the like button. It means a lot. It helps the algorithm out a little bit. And then subscribe to the channel so you get updates on the next time we post some content for you guys. Trying our best to push out weekly content to make sure we're on pace and pumping out new things to keep this channel relevant. We're doing this for the one. We know we serve a God that leaves the 99 for the one, and this Holy Talk podcast is intended to reach just one person that the Lord is placing it in front of. So hopefully you're inspired, and if you do struggle with alcoholism or know somebody that also had these types of strongholds and addiction of thoughts of suicide or what have you, share this video with them. You never know how it'll help them and inspire them and motivate them to continue to look for the face of Jesus. And if you need prayer, don't be afraid to tap in with us. We're more than ready. So back to the video. All right, y'all. So we're back with Ben once again. So, man, that news, I bet, rocked your world with your dad. If you don't mind sharing with the viewers, how did he pass?
So, my dad passed away being smashed between two street sweepers. They loaded up the first one. The guy who loaded up the first one, he's been doing it for years. So, like, he loaded up my dad in, like, seconds. And then the guy who was right behind him, my dad was guiding him on the trailer. So the guy had only done it once in his life, and he was fairly new. And he over-revved it for no apparent reason, and then just smacked my dad in there. So when we were in there listening to when I first heard, like, how it happened, and then giving my dad CPR and describing his chest going in like jello and not coming back up, it was like the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever heard in my dude, we just got done crying, and dude, that was the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever heard in my life. And then for him to say, like, you know, his last words were like, please God help me. So it was my dad was very Catholic, so, you know, he grew up in the Catholic world. So he would attend church every Sunday. Every time he would come into town, they'd go to church on Sunday, took the bread, and, you know, took, you know, that serious, you know. But, you know, as far as, like, his walk and his faith in God, I knew he believed in God, but I just didn't know, like,
you know,
his whole thing.
There's a hope.
Yeah.
There's a hope that he's in heaven, man. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of them things. It's never too late until it's too late. And look at the thief on the cross that was hanging next to Jesus, man.
Yeah.
He said, remember me when you enter into your kingdom. And Jesus looked him straight in his face and said, truly, you will be with me today in paradise. So I'm just saying, it's like that last second fadeaway 3 for the win essentially exists.
I mean, he wasn't very athletic, but I hope he switched it, you know?
Yeah. So fast forward into...
All right, living with my dad. You were actually coming back in from, you know, finally, I know we would have those long conversations over the phone.
Yeah.
Like, man, I can't wait till you come in. You're like, yeah, we get to finally hang. Because, I mean, that's just crazy, like, how close we got. And you weren't even in town.
Yeah.
You're like thousands of miles away.
Every time I visited, you would make it a point to come out and see me.
I just had to. And then plus, too, I was, like, so close to your parents. Like, it was just, like I said, if it wasn't for your mom kind of, like, pointing out the direction and planting that mustard seed of, like, trying to get us back in the church, like, it would have never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is true. Like, God puts people in your life, like, for a reason. And, and we were fighting it for, like, the longest time. And, I've had many conversations with your mother to this day, and it just, like, enlightens and blows my mind away of, like, the generosity of your mom, the kindness of her heart, where she's come from, and, her like, wisdom. Her testimony. Yeah, her wisdom, dude.
So,
so fast forward, and we're in the house, and, I'm still going through it, right? So we're still going through, like, I'm going through the motions, I throw myself back into work because, hey, I feel like this is going to heal the hole in my heart, and, it really wasn't doing nothing. So, and that started happening, me and my wife started, now the problems come back and they start reemerging, I'm fighting, my wife, I'm fighting, my stepmom, who had told us, like, hey, make this home your home. Don't mind me. I'm just going to come every once in a while and just chill. Like, come in for day 2, whatever. And she was doing that. And then all of a sudden, I don't think she fully grieved. So she took a lot of anger out on me. And growing up, too, like, I would ask my dad for things or whatever. And she would always get mad that my dad would help me out. Like, whether if it was financially or any type of way, like, she just, like, it, like, irked her. And I don't know why. And I was like, dude, that's my dad. Like, what does it matter to you?
Yeah.
So we're falling apart, and then we started going, and we know we were going to Bethel with y'all, and then we made the switch over when your mom was like, we're not going to Bethel no more. We're going to go, to this church over here. Okay. Didn't give me the whole synopsis of the story, but I was like, all right, cool. She said that this church was a little bit different. I mean, Bethel was cool at the time, but I don't know. I wasn't getting fed spiritually. And one of my biggest things is, like, I always tell people, is like, it doesn't matter what church you go to. If you're not leaving that place, like, fully spiritually fed, like, if it doesn't hit you in some type of way,
right,
that's not the church for you. Like, there's people that are just so stagnant in their church and where they're at, and they leave, and they're just like, you ask them about the service, they're like, oh, it was all right. Like, oh, it was cool. Like, your mom used to tell me, like, stuff like that. Like, hey, like, when we go, like, what did you get out of it? And I would sit there and break it down. Well, this is what I thought he was saying.
Yeah, she's good at doing that.
Yeah, so I love it. So we're going through that, and then we're trying to get in there and stuff like that. And then me and my wife start having problems. She starts working at a different place at this time of her life, and she's hanging around different people. Like, the crowd is way different. So for some of y'all didn't know, my wife used to work at a restaurant called Bill Miller's. And Bill Miller's is more of a younger style people. So people coming in through high school, are freshly out of high school, or they go to college and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like a small time.
Yeah, like a small time. Yeah, it's supposed to be like temporary type deal. But, if you start from the bottom and you've been there since you were 15, like, you pretty much work your way up to management, and you stay there. Like, you're a lifer. So she's there, and she's hanging around with these people. And she started hanging around with this one girl. Her name was, and she used to go to CBC. And she was all about God and was telling Desiree, like, hey, come to church with me, they do this and this and that. And then all of a sudden she fell off and started doing, like, tarot card readings and things like that. And I always have a sensibility of people. And I would always be like, Des, like, I don't think that you should be hanging around her. And then, I would hear, like, the conversations that they would have and, like, the messages, like, they would say to each other. And I was like, it's like, dude, you're hanging around, like, a wrong, like, these people aren't for you. So she started hanging out with people
that were a bad influence.
Yeah, were a bad influence. And they'd be like, hey, come over to the house, or hey, let's go to the bar. And at that time, we weren't going to the bars separate. Usually we would go together and hang out, like, with family members, but we weren't doing things like that. Like, she was just all of a sudden like, and she threw it in my face of, you made me a mother young. I didn't get to enjoy my 20s. Like, I didn't get to have that party life. So now she resented me for making her a mother at a young age. And now she was just like, I need a party and stuff like that.
Sort of like a midlife crisis.
Kind of, yeah, pretty much. No, I was like, well, we have kids. We have 3 kids. We're not about that life anymore. Like, you want to go to a bar and hang out, we can go. And she wouldn't want to go with me. She wanted to go with her friends. So she would be like, I'd be like, fine, whatever, like, go. And it would just irk me and bug me because now, like, she was dressing up a certain way. So I was like, well, you never dress like that when we go out. Like, now you're wearing short dresses and you're like, whatever. And I'm just like, who are you trying to impress? She was like, nobody. We're just going to have drinks. So I was like, all right, cool, whatever. And so we started, still trying to go to church and do all this, halfway in, halfway out. And, something started bothering me. And I was like, something didn't feel right. And I was like, now she's more distant, it's no more hand holding, or she doesn't like me being affectionate towards her anymore. And she's never really an affectionate person, but like usually she would. I was just like, man, what's going on? Like, what changed? And I was like, is it the atmosphere that she's in and this and that? And she wouldn't really talk to me. Started dressing different, started wearing more makeup, and just started talking a certain way and things like that. And we started getting distant from each other. And then I'm just like, well, am I not praying hard enough? Am I not doing this and this and that? And
So you started to question your spiritual walk now. Like, maybe it's my fault.
yeah,
And I assume that's whenever you planted the idea in my mind to start the Bible study.
no. So I wanted to do it when we had already separated. So going into that, like, she started, doing this, and I found out she was, talking to other people. Like, she was stepping out of her marriage. So I was just like, okay, well, we had separated at the time. She had left to go be with her. She went to go stay with her parents, and I stayed at my dad's house. You don't realize you missed the chaos until the chaos is gone. And what I mean by chaos, we have kids. So a big house that's empty, and when your wife went to, out of town and you were here by yourself,
Yeah.
it is the most loneliest, depressing feeling ever. Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter what you are. It's just, you're like, oh, finally, like, yeah, peace and quiet. The wife and kids are gone. Yeah, I get to chill and just relax. And you're just like sleeping with the TV on, trying to fall asleep. And this is like, man, like, I miss my family.
Yeah.
So I'm in the house and I'm bored out of my mind. The kids are coming and going. And, we started, having these, battles back and forth. And then, I'm trying to hang out with you guys. And then I remember that one time I hung out with you guys. We went to Buc-ee's and, like, we had a good time. I bought her something, and then I think we went somewhere else. And then she was just like, I can't do this no more. I was like, can't do what? And she was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, yada, yada, yada. Like, I think we should separate. And I was like, what? Separate for what? And she was just like, you're this, you're that. I was like, I was already, like, talking different. I wasn't being a certain way anymore. I'd slowed down on drinking, which was fantastic. And I was just like, well, what do you mean? And things like that. And come to find out, like I said, that's when I found out she was, like, stepping out. And she was just like, I just need my space. I was like, well, we're married and we have kids. You don't get space. Like, I would love space. I don't get space. I come home, I help you with the kids, yada, yada, yada. So, now we're separated, and I'm at the house, and then we're doing, like, something was speaking to me about, hey, like, when they talk about, get together, get connected with the church, go reach out, do a Bible study. And, I lived on the northeast side at the time over there for Nacogdoches and O'Connor. The church we went to is Gateway over there off of Bandera in 1604.
Yeah.
When I looked at the map to see, hey, how can I get plugged into, a Bible study, whether it be for, like, couples or just men or whatever, nothing was close to me. Everything was far, and everything started at a certain time to where I was like, I'm not getting out of work at that time. Like, that's a ridiculous time.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at it, and I remember calling you, and I was like, hey, man, what do you think of the idea? Because I remember we were at your house, and you were showing me, like, the old YouTube videos you just do in Albuquerque. Trophies. Dun, dun, dun. And I was like, you're always, like, you were doing your studies too, because you were at Camp Bullis, you were an instructor now. So you were studying and you were giving presentations and things like that. So I was like, dude, RJ, you're a great speaker. We should start a Bible study. We should get together, because you weren't going to a Bible study at the time. I wasn't going to the Bible study at the time. I was like, man, that would be great. and you like shut me down, and I was like, oh, you're like, nah, man, you need to find one.
Little do you know, it's like when the military sent me back home of all places for my last 2 years in the service, they sent me to a school where they taught me how to teach.
Yeah.
And I knew it was all God.
Yeah.
I knew God was trying to tell me like ministry of some sort is in my future.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't just use this just for the military.
Yeah.
I knew for a fact that, you know, for one, he gave me the desires of my heart, bringing me back to my hometown because I was low-key homesick for many years.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And then coming back home, being an instructor away from the career I was doing for 5 years, gave me a break and more of a structure, set schedule, which I craved.
Yeah.
And it was what I needed, man. And then so when you approached me with that, it was like confirmation that God is sending me to the school, teaching me how to be a teacher, essentially, an instructor. I've always been, up until that point, I was going all in for the Lord.
Yeah.
You know, serving him diligently, seeking his face, and growing with my knowledge with him. So your timing was literally perfect. I think if you would have asked me maybe a year before or a year after or something, I probably would have been complacent and most likely wouldn't have been up for it. But I was on fire, you know, with blessings from God. I felt obligated to give back some way or another in serving him.
Yeah.
So
I remember that, and then you shot me down. We were like, all right, cool. Yeah.
Well, because you were across town, I'm like, how are we going to make this work? You're in the Northeast, I'm in the Southwest. Like,
yeah, of course, true that. You know, we didn't think about it. I was just like, hey, you know, I was like, for me, it was like just kind of like planting that seed in you. You know, that's like, hey, you know, RJ, you know, this idea I got. Like, no, Ben, your idea is stupid. It'll never work. I'm just kidding. No. So you're like, no, you'll find one next to you. You're like, I'm look, because I remember you telling me too, like you wanted to look for something, you know, for you too, but you just weren't you weren't sure of anything. And then we hang up, and then you call me like hours later, like, if I do this, are you in? And I'm like, why would I tell you and then not be in? You're all
my biggest thing was this commitment. I don't want to like dedicate a day out of every week, and if you're like, you know, not coming through and being consistent.
True.
So that was my biggest, like, not fear, but like worry about starting something like that.
Yeah. And it worked out great because, you know, you're like, well, what is this day? Because I didn't know Mitch at the time. You know, shout out Mitch, OG. Mm-hmm. And then Timothy, another OG. And it started off me, you, Tim, and Mitch. Just first day, Tuesday. And you're like, because I remember you asking me, I was like, does Tuesday work for you?
Yeah, because I had a relationship with all these guys, and I felt, when you brought it up to me, I felt compelled to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Compelled to share the good news to these guys because I love every single one of y'all.
And I like Tim too. So like when you said like, hey, you know, my cousin, and then you're like, our cousin. And I was like, yeah, I mean, because he's our cousin. You're like, Tim's going to be there. I was like, oh, I like Tim. Like, Tim is cool. And then you're like, and then my buddy Mitch. And then I was like, who's Mitch? Cheating on me?
Nah, Mitch is the homie. He sold me many cars. He works at a dealership. He'll be on the pod soon, hopefully.
Yeah. I know. I can't wait to hear that one. Man. That one's strong. But so you do it, we do it, and then like we're four guys, all lost. You know, looking for the same thing, all in common, which is great. You know, coming from all these backgrounds, and then you know we start doing. You know, you start teaching, and I remember we're in Philippians. You know, you talk to your Uncle Ray. Shout out your Uncle Ray.
Shout out Pastor Ray.
Yeah, Pastor Ray. Hope to meet you one day. And then we take off and we're going and we're doing things. And as we're doing this, I remember too, we're going to church and I wanted to get baptized. You know, we're doing this. It started coming into my heart, discernment. And I was like, man, I really want to get, you know, more in touch. And I saw it as if I get closer to God, my wife will come back. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll get everything back. And it was like, you know, I was trying to barter with God too at the same time. Like, hey, God, if you give me my wife back, I'll stop smoking cigarettes. Yeah. Because, you know, I had a nasty habit. I remember you telling me, like, hey, man, did you just smoke before you get here? Yeah. You smell disgusting. Which I couldn't be mad at you.
I grew up around secondhand smoke, man. So I was just like horrible. Annoyed by it, bro.
Dude, you know what's crazy? I haven't smoked cigarettes in like a couple of years now. And now, like, when I walk past somebody who smokes cigarettes, that smell is so disgusting. I'm like, dude, like, I used to smell like that.
I was like, Ben, did you just smoke outside right now? He goes, yeah.
Maybe.
Stink. Go on.
It told me it wasn't going to
No disrespect if you're a smoker.
So, yeah, I was trying to barter with God, kind of like, hey, you know, I'll follow you if you do this for me. Not knowing, and, you know, as we're getting into it.
Yeah, because we're we're going through Bible study for
Yeah.
months now. I remember the arguments between you and Desiree always consistently happening. Some
Yeah.
nights that you stayed on my couch.
It was a comfy
And
couch.
it's a really comfortable couch, but you didn't belong there.
No,
I
I did
wanted
not.
you back home. I wanted y'all's marriage reconciled. I wanted you guys like united again. And we're praying hard,
Yeah.
really hard, like every Tuesday night.
Yeah, we were.
And every like other day you were calling me, or every day you were calling me for that season.
Yeah.
And we were
was
trying our best
Horrible
to
season.
pray for y'all's marriage, man.
Yeah.
And granted, Des was doing what Des was doing, but it's part of her testimony as well.
Yeah.
And
I've seen her come so far too.
exactly.
And then I was bad at cussing. I remember every time you'd like, what?
Yeah, I was in the military when we started
Yeah,
the study, so
I
you have
know.
to remember, like, I'm in front of students that also had potty mouths themselves, and I would correct them.
Well, no, too. You just didn't like cussing it no more. So it was just like, how
Well, I've
did you
never been a
break-
cusser since
Yeah,
like
true.
high school or something. You know what I mean? Even then, like
Since
I
you
always
got-
never. I always had respect for my parents. I never cussed around them. Never said like, words around them. And
I wish I was like that.
granted,
man.
I'm not like a saint. Don't get me wrong. I have a testimony myself, but
Yeah.
when I joined the military, all of these things became disgusting because I was
Yeah.
also finding the Lord.
Yeah.
And cussing, in my opinion, there's other ways to get your point across other than using a cuss word.
Yeah.
You don't have to. I was a full-on military police officer. I put people in handcuffs several different times, and I got my point across without a cuss word being exiting my
Yeah.
mouth. So believe me, if there's a will, there's a
I
way.
wish I was like that, man, because I was like, man, I can't wait till I was 13. I'm 18. I'll be able to say whatever I want. And I'm over here in my dad's house. Like,
But anyways, like,
boy, you don't say that.
we start to study, we start flowing.
start to
We're on
flowing.
pace. You're growing, you're
I'm
learning,
growing,
you're
I'm
leaning on
learning.
God.
And then I want to get baptized.
You get baptized.
So I have a conversation with your wife. Shout out, Bree. And I'm like, man, I want to get baptized, but I don't know if I'm ready. She tells me, like, God wants you to come as you are. Like, if you try to feel like you're going to be ready, like, you're never going to be ready. And that meant a lot from Bree because, like I said, I'm close to y'all. She's like my sister. You're like my brother. Sometimes I'm like, man, are we brothers or are we cousins? I mean, because you give it to me straight, and that's what I appreciate from you from day one. And so I have this conversation with Bree, and I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like, if I sit here and try to wait to get perfect, I'm never going to be perfect. Like, I'm never going to be ready for him. Like, I'm never going to be at a point to where, like, we're talking about the guy who's created the heaven and earth, all the stars and everything like that. I'm never going to be ready. And she's right. So what happens? I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it next weekend. And the only reason why I said I was going to do it the next weekend was because I didn't have any clothes. Like, I'm not driving in wet clothes. Like, you're ridiculous. So I was like, yeah, for sure. Next Sunday, that's what I'm going to do. Rain or shine, I'm going to get baptized.
Yeah.
And it meant so much, too, doing that baptism because they let you baptize me. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where we prayed, you dunked me. You probably left me a little bit longer than you should have. I'm just kidding. You got some water still in my head somewhere. So
Baptism's
you
a beautiful day.
It is. And not just mine, but everybody's. Everybody who dedicates their lives and they're reborn, and it is like you don't realize
a spiritual new birthday.
Yeah. So coming out, I felt so much better. Like a big old weight was lifted on my shoulders. I got to do it in front of a lot of people. It wasn't really like telling people about it. And it was just like, I'm going to do it. And I remember we were doing it. Brie was like, did you bring clothes? She remembered.
When Jesus was baptized, the clouds opened up and the heavens open and God looked down at Jesus. I mean, you hear a voice, this is my son, who I'm very pleased with.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful to know, like, although we probably couldn't hear it ourselves, I'm sure God looked down at you and said he's pleased with you for choosing to be baptized.
And your mom was there too, and she was so proud. They do that. She almost cried, I think.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, man. But then there we are on pace. You're learning, you're growing. And one specific night happens.
Well, before we get to that night, so we start going in and out, of me going crazy because I want my wife back so bad. And I'm just doing dumb things, looking in our phone, all this stuff. And then, we keep going back and forth. We're hurting the kids. Not only are we hurting ourselves, we have kids and we're hurting our kids. So, she leaves for a time being. COVID happens, of course. And then out of all things, I lose my grandmother, my dad's side, who, I was pretty close to. Out of both my grandparents, she was one I was close to. And then I lose my cousin that same month. And then not only that, and then a month later, I lose Zach, one of my buddies who I introduced to Desiree's aunt and got married to. So it's like,
Didn't you also lose your stepdad?
and then I lost my stepdad a year after my dad.
People were dropping like flies around you, man. It was a scary time.
It was,
And it was like I'm thankful you started coming to study when you did, because the timing was impeccable for you
and it sucks
getting
'cause
close to God.
I remember telling you, I was like, dude, I'm starting to get numb around all these deaths. And I was like, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't like it, because when you become numb, you don't have feelings. And it's not like I didn't have feelings for the people. It was just like my heart didn't want to hurt no more. So it was just like, But I did hurt when I lost her, because going over there, and it meant a lot because Desiree came with me with the kids, and we went out there and we, said our goodbyes or see you laters, because she was really into God and she would pray for me. And one of the
I love how you said it.
What?
You said your see you laters.
You see you laters.
That's what it is. You have hope after life.
I know
here
she's
on
there.
earth.
She was so into God. She went to a Christian church, non-denominational, and she was so into God. And she was, if anybody would meet her, she would just brighten your day. She was just kind of like your mother, but a little less steroids, maybe about almost the same thing. And she loved God. She loved me. She loved my family, and she loved me with all my faults. And then we would have conversations like crazy. She'd be at work, answer my phone call, and we would just talk about everything, talk about like what I was going through and everything like that. And she helped me a lot during my journey with my separation between me and my wife when we were going through it, of keeping me sane. We'd have conversations. I would cry on the phone with her. I just was like, I want her back. And the one thing that never came out of her mouth was anything bad about Desiree.
Yeah, was always respected her.
I always respected her. She always was.
I did too, for the record, just saying.
You did. You did. But the way she was, and like when I lost her, I was just like, man, I'm losing hope, because why would God call one of the biggest persons who keeps me so centered and so grounded, and why would he take her from me? Like I was, at that point I was being selfish. And then I kind of left, like going to Bible study. I was just like in and out, going through everything. And, I was trying to, I know you were trying to reel me back in, and I was just like going through it all, just letting my emotions. So now at this point, I'm trying to battle myself, with God. And like, I'm trying to be like, well, I'm trying, God, like, why is this happening to me? I'm losing my family. I'm losing the person who you gave me. And did I take her for granted? Did I take my life for granted? What am I doing wrong here? Am I not praying hard enough? Am I not meaning what I'm saying? And, I'll admit it, I was going back and forth through everything. And when I would get a glimpse of hope, if everything was great, like things would change. She was going back out with her friends. Like at this point, we moved out of the house. We're in an apartment, and I got the apartment because that's what she wanted. And then she was like, we're going to start fresh. So when we got into the apartment, it was like, we're leaving all that behind. We're coming into the apartment. You've came by once or twice to the apartment. We had game night. We were trying to do game nights. And it seemed like it kind of got a little bit worse. Like I was trying to force God into her.
Yeah.
I was like, you need to go to church, and you need, but I wasn't looking at what I needed. Like, what did I need to do? I needed to stop telling her what to do. I wasn't leading her. I was trying to like force her into.
You're like pushing her.
Yeah, pushing her in, shoving it down her throat, and just being an all around, like, not bad person, but just like trying to like, I was bound down. Like I was bound down to her, and just like, fine, if I let you do this.
You put her before God.
I did. That was one of the biggest things. And that was one of the things I was like, I'm putting my wife before God. And I realized like that's what was going on. So fast forward a little bit more. So we're going through it. We get separated for a while again. And then she had finally when we got COVID, she decided to come back. So she came back for all the wrong reasons. She came back because she was sick. Let's all have COVID together. Yeah, it was not very fun. I know you've gotten it. A lot of people, we've lost a lot of people. Hopefully, we meet them where they're at. But so we're going through it. We finally get over it. And then you would think she would stay where she would need to stay, and just kept doing whatever she wanted to do, just losing faith. And the devil had a real stronghold around her. The group of friends, and the things that I was reading, like, oh girl, you do whatever you want, this and that, like you need to have fun and da da da. And I'm like, this woman's married. Y'all know she's married, but yeah, y'all were dragging her out, and then she's allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
So I started drinking heavier. I was not being a very good influence. I was, stopped kind of going to church. I tried to go into church and just wasn't even feeling church. Whether the sermon would be great, I'd just be in there with like an empty heart, because I was so
Upset.
miserable and so upset, you
Yeah.
know.
You're like,
And,
everything you're doing, you're trying to do everything right, but things in life are happening wrong.
yeah, dude, we're starting to get closer, and I was, like I said, I started drinking a little bit more, and then we had a great Valentine's date and everything like that, and then, everything was going good, and all of a sudden, like a week or two later, like she steps out of our marriage again. I'm like, I thought we just had this conversation that we weren't doing things.
So when
And
did the night happen?
the night happened when I knew something was wrong. I found, prenatal pills in her bag, and I was like, what is she doing? She was always going to this friend's house, or she would always say, like, I'm going to meet up with a friend or whatever, like this girl or whatever. And I would find out, like, she wasn't meeting this girl, like she was meeting up with a guy. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why do you have prenatal pills? Like, we're already in April. Like, last time was February, and here we are. What are you doing prenatal? Oh, well, it helps me with this and that. And I'm like, you only take prenatal pills like when you're pregnant and like when you really need it. Like, you don't need it. You don't know what I need. We're fighting over prenatal pills, right?
Mhm.
But I have this thing in my head. I'm like, something's going on. So me trying to play detective, and I was just like, well, what's really going on? And she's like, I'm not doing anything, it's all in your head. You just can't leave the past alone. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I'm just like, at this point, I'm just like desperately praying, like, God, if, you want me to find anything out, you're going to lead me to whatever. And sure enough, I found a pregnancy test in the car. I was like, who hides a pregnancy test in the car? And I'm like, whose are these? And she was like, they're mine. Didn't deny it. And just like with a straight face, like what? What are you going to do? And then the first thing in my head was like, who we having a kid with? Like, whose baby is it?
You didn't assume it was yours at all?
No, the timing was off. So I was like, we had 3 kids. So like I could pinpoint time frames of everything. Like, okay, this happened, this, that. Like I knew how.
So you try
happened.
to like backdate,
Dude,
more or less the last time.
Yeah, the ADHD kicks in real hard, and I'm like, this doesn't add up. Like the math ain't mathing. Like, what's going on here? So I am like, what? So she like blows me off nonchalantly, and I'm just like, wow, like I'm stuck. Like I'm like literally stuck. And like
So right away when you found out, you knew it wasn't your baby.
Yeah, I knew. I'm not stupid. Like bro, we barely even did.
How did you feel?
Disappointed, because she had no feelings towards any of this. So I look at this test, I'm freaking out. I text the family like in a group chat, and they're like, well, that's not your place to tell everybody that she's pregnant. Like, this is my wife, and people are...
So the world's crashing down. People are like mad at you.
People are mad at me for letting the news out. People are mad at me for not, they would tell me, you need to tell Desiree that she can't go out. Like, put your foot down. All right, cool. I put my foot down. They're like, you need to, like, you can't control her. Like, well, what am I going to do? Like, everything's falling apart. I don't know who to turn to. And, I wasn't talking to you at the time because I was just so into my feelings, and I was drinking. So at this point, I would go to work. I couldn't concentrate at work. I was really, really messing up at work. And after I was just looking forward to getting out of work. I get out of work and I would head to the bar, and I'd have a couple of beers, a couple of shots, and I'd just sit there, smoke cigarettes, and I'd just be there and just like till the pain goes numb, like that temporary high. Like I just want the pain to go away. And then you're in a bar with a bunch of alcoholics, and then, some people, you're able to control the music at the bar I was going to. And I was like putting on songs that make me more depressed, like put me in that mood. And I'm just like, I'm just
intentionally.
Intentionally, just feeling. And then all of a sudden I start getting these thoughts in my heads, and I'm just like, man, I'm not good enough for my wife. I'm not good enough for my kids. Like, my marriage is falling apart. I lost my dad. I've lost my other dad. I lost my grandma. I lost my friend.
The world is crashing. The enemy is whispering in your ear.
Everything is spinning out of control. I don't know how to control it. I just want it to stop. I want the pain to stop. I just gotta let it all go. I come home drunk. And I remember the night I don't know how I remember the night. I'm so out of it, dude.
You had your breaking point.
I was at my breaking point. We get out. I go to the bar with my buddy, another manager. We're there. We have like 3 or 4 beers. And then it's like, hey, you good? And my buddy asked me, like, are you good? And he even tells me, like, to this day, like, that night, he was like, I should have told you to come home with me. He's like, something told me to tell you to come home with me, but I didn't. And he's like, you good? And I was like, yeah, man, I'm good, and just have like one or two more. So I switched from draft beer to Crown Apple and Sprite. And if you've never had Crown Apple and Sprite, Sprite's already sweet. And it doesn't have caffeine, but it's got a sweetener in it. And then Crown Apple is already made to be sweet. So it is a very sweet drink. And I have 4 double shots of those. And I'm just there chilling.
So essentially 8 shots.
Pretty much, yeah. And, mixed drinks. So, like, yeah, it's like they have 8 shots and mixed drink. I'm there, and I'm, like, out of it. And I leave. And, of course, I put on music. Music's my thing. I'm driving home, and I'm just, like, in it. And I'm not even thinking right. I'm just, like, shouldn't even be driving, first of all. And I do not condone drinking and driving. So please, anybody out there who has a drinking problem, more than welcome. Reach out to anybody who you have a problem, and we're here to pray for you. But I'm driving home. I am massively intoxicated. Make it home by the grace of God, safe. I don't know how. He should have made me pop a tire or something. I get home. All these emotions are in me. I'm just I'm so out of it. I am out of it. I want the pain to stop so much. The whisper in my ear, like, you're not worth it. You're not, she doesn't love you. She's having a kid with somebody else, and you ain't nobody. And, like, you're a horrible father. You're a horrible son. You're a horrible friend. You're a horrible coworker. Everything. I get home, and I'm just like, I open up the Band-Aid that I was trying to close up. And I was like, whose is it? She was like, what? And I was like, I want to know who's it. She's like, well, who do you think? And I'm like, oh, I can be there for you. I'm drunk, yeah. I can be there for you. You're drunk. You need to go to bed. And I'm like, no. And then she's like, I'm going to call my dad. I was like, call him. I don't care. I grab her phone. I grab all the kids' phones. I grab her phone. I have my phone. I head downstairs. I don't know what told me to grab a knife. I grabbed this knife, and I head downstairs, and I go to the car. And at that moment, I could have just drove off, and nothing would have happened, right? I'm already depressed. I'm not mad at her. I'm just disappointed. That was my whole thing. To me, it's you can be mad at anybody. For me, if somebody's disappointed me, then that really hurts. And I get in the car, and she I'm just waiting for her. I don't know why I'm waiting for her. And she comes down, and she comes down. She's like, give me my phone. I was like, I ain't giving you nothing. And I follow her because I'm so upset. And then she turns around. She's like, give me my phone. And I put the knife in her hand, and I put my hands over her, and I stab myself 4 times. And I tell her, this is what you're doing to me. Blaming her for everything. And all of it wasn't her fault, of course.